I never expected it to come to this. Jennifer and I had what many would call a picture-perfect relationship. We got married young, both just 25, and it felt like we had the world at our feet. We lived in a cozy suburban neighborhood in California, had a beautiful two-story house, and even planned for kids in the next few years. Yet, as I sit here reflecting on everything that happened, it's clear I was living in a fool's paradise. At first, I noticed subtle changes in her. Jennifer, who used to be dedicated to our relationship, started acting distant. It was almost like she was a different person. She'd come home late from work, often saying she was stuck in meetings or working overtime. I had no reason not to trust her. She had always been the driven one, ambitious and career-focused. But intuition has a way of gnawing at you, doesn't it? I brushed it off at first, convincing myself that I was just being paranoid. Things started to escalate. On weekends, when we used to spend quality time together, she often wanted to go out with her friends instead. At first, it was just a couple of nights a month. Then it turned into a weekly occurrence. I'd sit alone on the couch, flipping through channels while she was out, feeling that familiar pang of loneliness. I'd ask if everything was all right and she'd brush me off with a smile, claiming I was overreacting and needed to lighten up. And then, one fateful Friday night, everything changed. I was fixing myself dinner when I accidentally stumbled upon her phone. It was sitting on the kitchen counter, buzzing incessantly. I thought about ignoring it, respecting her privacy, but curiosity got the better of me. I picked it up and saw a message notification pop up from a contact named David. That name didn't ring any bells. I hesitated for a moment, but then I opened it. The conversation was a flurry of flirty emojis, inside jokes, and plans that didn't include me. My blood ran cold as I read through the messages. There was no doubt she was cheating on me. I stood frozen in place, the phone slipping from my grasp and hitting the floor with a dull thud. The feelings that surged through me were a mix of fury and disbelief. I couldn't wrap my mind around it. How could she do this to me? How long had this been going on? I felt like a fool. Here I was, a loyal husband, while she was out with a guy named David, sharing intimate moments I thought were reserved for us. I was so lost in my anger that I didn't hear her come in until she spoke, her voice breaking through my daze. "Why do you have my phone?" she asked, a hint of irritation in her tone. That moment was surreal. I felt like I was in a movie, the kind where the protagonist confronts their cheating partner. I could see her demeanor shift as the realization dawned on her that I had uncovered her secret. The mask fell, and just for a second I saw vulnerability in her eyes. I took a deep breath, trying to suppress the whirlwind of emotions. I needed to confront her, but I also wanted to choose my words carefully. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of seeing me break down. Instead, I simply asked, "Who is David?" Her response was a flurry of lies, stumbling over her words as she concocted excuses that felt as empty as the promises we once made to each other. "He's just a coworker," she said, her eyes darting away from mine. "We're just friends. It's nothing serious." That was the moment I realized I was dealing with someone who thought she could manipulate the truth. I felt a mixture of rage and heartbreak. I couldn't believe how little respect she had for me, for us. As her justification spilled out, I felt my heart harden. I knew then that I needed to think clearly. This was the beginning of a long road ahead, and I had to be ready for what was to come. The confrontation left me reeling. I stood there, feeling like I was caught in the eye of a storm, while Jennifer continued to spin her web of lies. Her face was a mask of frustration, yet behind it I could see a flicker of fear of being exposed. In that moment, I decided I wouldn't play the victim. No, I wouldn't allow her to manipulate the narrative any longer. I needed a plan. As she fumbled for words, trying to convince me that I was imagining things, anger bubbled inside me. It was a strain, mixture of sadness and rage, like two opposing forces fighting for dominance. I wanted to scream at her, to demand she tell me the truth, but deep down, I knew that wouldn't change anything. I needed proof, concrete evidence that I could use to confront her properly and make her face the reality of her actions. I turned away from her, trying to gather my thoughts as she continued her desperate attempts to minimize what was happening. "Mark, you're overreacting," she said, her tone shifting to one of annoyance. You're being so dramatic, it's not like that. You need to trust me. Trust? How could I trust someone who had been lying to my face? I needed to cool off to think, so I decided to go for a drive. As I pulled out of the driveway, I glanced back at our home, the home we built together. I felt the weight of betrayal heavy in my chest. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to escape the suffocating atmosphere that had settled in our house. As I drove aimlessly through the quiet streets, my mind raced. I had to confront her with undeniable proof, and I knew it wouldn't take long to gather what I needed. The next morning, I planned to follow her. I had an idea of when she typically met up with her friends, and I needed to see David for myself. The next day, I set my plan into motion. I woke up early and kept my phone close, making sure to keep my demeanor neutral. Jennifer was up before me, her usual bright and cheerful self. I could see the tension in her movements as she got ready for work. It was like a game of poker. She was hiding her cards, but I could see the nervous tick in her eye. As she left, I casually mentioned that I had some errands to run. She barely paid attention, wrapped up in her own world, and I knew it was time for me to execute the first part of my plan. I followed her discreetly, keeping a safe distance as I trailed her car toward the downtown area. My heart pounded as I drove behind her, weaving through the city streets. I was filled with a mix of adrenaline and dread. What if I was wrong? What if I was just being paranoid? But deep down, I knew I had to see it through. I had to know. She parked outside a trendy cafe, and I pulled into a nearby lot to watch. Time slowed to a crawl as I observed her getting out of the car, her phone in hand, tapping away as if she was texting someone. I leaned against my steering wheel, holding my breath as she entered the cafe. I waited, feeling every second stretch into infinity. A part of me was hoping for a miracle, that she'd walk in, order a coffee, and then walk back out alone. But that wasn't what happened. Just minutes after she walked in, another figure entered. It was a tall guy, casually dressed, and I quickly realized it was David. The way they greeted each other sent a bolt of electricity through me. They hugged briefly, but it was enough to send my heart plummeting. I felt like a spectator in my own life, watching as Jennifer's facade cracked further with every smile exchanged. They settled into a booth in the corner, and I could see their heads bent closely together, sharing whispered laughter. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to see and hear for myself what was going on. I left my car and walked toward the cafe, slipping inside the door with the confidence of someone who belonged there. I found a spot at the counter where I could see them without being too obvious. My pulse raced, but I forced myself to breathe deeply. What I witnessed next shattered my heart into pieces. I watched as they looked at each other with a familiarity that was undeniably intimate, more than friends, more than coworkers. I strained to catch snippets of their conversation, snippets that confirmed my worst fears. The way she leaned in closer to him, the way her hand casually brushed against his. It was all so casual for her, so normal. Each laugh felt like a stab in my gut. And then, just as I thought I'd seen enough, David leaned in and whispered something that made Jennifer giggle. I couldn't take it anymore. I was filled with a rage that bubbled over, and I knew I had to confront her. I couldn't let this go unchallenged. I stormed out of the cafe, my heart pounding in my chest, ready to shatter the illusion she had so carefully constructed. The time for excuses was over. I was going to make her face the truth, whether she liked it or not. I raced back to my car, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I was consumed with fury. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions, all swirling around the reality that my wife was not the person I thought she was. I could still see her laughing with David, her head tilted back, carefree as if she had no idea the chaos she was about to unleash in our lives. As I drove home, I replayed the scene in my mind, each moment, every laugh, every whispered word. It was like a punch to the gut, one I couldn't shake off. I had to confront her, no more lies. It was time to peel back the layers of deceit she had wrapped herself in. When I got home, I found her lounging on the couch, scrolling through her phone. She looked up as I entered, and for a moment I thought I saw a flicker of guilt in her eyes. But she quickly masked it with a smile, asking me about my The casualness infuriated me and I decided to cut straight to the chase. "Jennifer," I said, my voice steady but firm, "we need to talk." Her smile faltered and I could see the tension creeping back into her features. "About what?" she asked, her casual tone slipping away. "About you and David," I said, crossing my arms. "I know everything." Her eyes widened and for a split second I could see the walls she had built around herself start to crumble. "What do you mean?" She stammered, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. "I saw you both at the cafe. I watched you hug him, laugh with him, be everything you're not with me," I said, my voice rising in intensity. "How long has this been going on, Jen?" The silence stretched between us like a chasm. I could see her mind racing, trying to formulate a response, any response. Finally, she sighed, her shoulders slumping as if the weight of the world had just landed on them. "Mark, don't." I cut her off, rage boiling over. "Just don't. I can't hear your excuses. You cheated on me. You had an affair and you thought I wouldn't find out." She opened her mouth to speak, but the words failed her. Instead, she looked at me with a mix of defiance and vulnerability. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she said finally, her voice softer now. "David and I just connected, you know. You've been so busy with work and I felt alone. I didn't want this to happen." I felt a rush of nausea at her words. Was this her justification? I had worked hard to provide for us. "So you thought it was okay to find comfort in another man, to betray your husband?" "I didn't think of it that way," she snapped, her frustration boiling over. "I thought it was just harmless flirting at first. I thought I could handle it. But then it became more." More. That one word echoed in my mind like a death knell. I felt hot anger surging through me, but I also felt something else, an overwhelming sadness. I had invested so much into our relationship, and now it felt like I was watching it all crumble before my eyes. "You think this is just going to blow over, that we can just sweep it under the rug and pretend it didn't happen?" She looked at me, her expression shifting from anger to pleading. "Mark, I love you. I made a mistake. Can't we work through this?" Love, she loved me. I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. "If you truly loved me, you wouldn't have done this in the first place. You wouldn't have destroyed everything we built together over some infatuation." Her eyes filled with tears, and I suddenly felt a twinge of regret for the pain I was causing her. But I quickly pushed it aside, knowing I had to stand my ground. "What were you thinking? That I wouldn't care, that I wouldn't be hurt?" "I don't know. I thought you wouldn't find out. I thought I could have both," she said, her voice breaking. "I didn't want to lose you, lose me." I echoed incredulously. "You already lost me the moment you decided to lie and cheat." The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I had to be strong. I couldn't let her manipulate me any longer. I couldn't let her think she still had control over me after what she had done. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my emotions as I prepared to lay down the hard truth. "Jennifer, you have to understand that this isn't something I can just forgive and forget. You've broken my trust and I don't know if I can ever get that back. I need time to think about what I want." Her expression shifted again. This time, a flicker of acceptance crossed her features. "I'll do anything, Mark. I'll end things with David, I promise. Just give me a chance to prove that I can change." I shook my head, feeling a mix of anger and pity. "It's not about David anymore. It's about us, and I don't even know if there is an us left. I need to be alone to figure this out." I turned away from her, letting her words hang in the air between us. I was done with the excuses, the manipulation, and the lies. I had to gather my thoughts and reflect on what this betrayal meant for my future. As I walked away, I felt a sense of finality wash over me. The illusion was broken, and now it was time to shatter her expectations. I was ready to take control of my life again. The days that followed were some of the hardest I've ever faced. I moved into the guest room, a decision that felt both liberating and suffocating. It was strange to sleep in a space that was once filled with our shared memories, now tainted by betrayal. I felt the weight of the world on my shoulders, caught between the desire to confront the pain and the need to distance myself from it all. Jennifer tried to reach out, of course. She would knock on the door, leaving messages filled with apologies and promises to change. The first few evenings, I'd hear her sobbing softly, a sound that made my heart ache and twist in conflicting directions. The emotional turmoil was relentless. I felt anger, sorrow, betrayal, and oddly enough, a sense of relief. I no longer had to pretend everything was perfect. I could finally confront the reality of our marriage. But amidst the confusion, I began to gather my thoughts. I spent hours reflecting on the relationship we had built and the cracks that had formed beneath the surface. I replayed memories of happier times, trying to reconcile them with her betrayal. The laughter we shared on our honeymoon felt distant now, overshadowed by the weight of her lies. I found myself questioning everything. Was our love ever real? Did I really know her at all? In that turbulent time, my friends became my lifeline. I confided in Mark, my longtime buddy who had always been there for me. I talked through my feelings, and he listened without judgment. "Dude, you deserve someone who respects you," he reminded me during one of our late-night talks. "You can't rebuild a relationship on lies. Trust is everything." His words resonated with me. I realized I needed to take definitive steps forward, not just for my own sanity but to regain my sense of self. The idea of revenge started to take shape in my mind, not revenge in a vindictive sense, but more a way to reclaim my power. Jennifer thought she had control over the narrative, but I was ready to shatter that illusion. I began to formulate a plan. My first step was to gather evidence. While I'd confronted Jennifer about her affair, I wanted to ensure I had documentation to solidify my case and prepare for the next phase of this tumultuous journey. I started following her again, but this time it felt different. I wasn't driven by anger. I was driven by a need for clarity. One evening, I found myself sitting in my car, parked a few blocks from her office. I watched as she left work, her demeanor appearing buoyant, as if nothing was wrong. I felt a pang of resentment. Did she think she could just move on and pretend everything was fine? I followed her to a local bar where she met with some friends. My heart raced as I waited for any sign of David. Hours passed, and I was about to give up when I spotted them together across the bar. They were laughing, their body language telling a story I didn't want to witness. They were still entangled in this web of deception, and it was infuriating. I quickly snapped a couple of photos, determined to have proof of her ongoing betrayal. As I drove home, I felt a mixture of empowerment and sadness. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was taking control. I couldn't change the past, but I could dictate what happened next. I decided I would show her the evidence, confront her with the reality of her actions. I wanted her to feel the weight of her choices, not just the emotional impact on me, but the way her decisions affected everything she claimed to care about. The next day, I laid the photos out on the kitchen table. When Jennifer walked in, she paused, confusion washing over her features. "What's this?" she asked, her eyes darting toward the images. "Evidence of your continued betrayal," I said, my tone steady. "I thought you ended things with David." She paled, her eyes widening as she looked through the pictures, disbelief etched across her face. "Mark, I can explain. It's not what it looks like." "Not what it looks like. You're still meeting him. You're still lying. Don't even try to twist this into something less than what it is." I shot back, trying to keep my composure. "Please just let me explain," she pleaded, desperation creeping into her voice. I shook my head, feeling the anger rise within me again. "No more excuses, Jennifer. You've had your chance and you blew it. You shattered our marriage when you decided to cheat. You thought you could have it all, but now you need to face the reality of your actions." Her face twisted in pain as she processed my words. "I didn't want to hurt you. I thought I could fix it. I thought I could have both." "That's the problem, isn't it?" I replied. "You were selfish. You thought you could juggle two lives without consequences, but now you have to deal with the fallout. This isn't just about you anymore." I watched as the realization sunk in, her mask slipping away as she began to understand the gravity of what she had done. I felt a sense of finality wash over me. This moment would define the next steps of our lives, and I was determined to take control. "I can't continue living like this, Jennifer," I said, my voice steady. "I need to think about myself and what I want. I'm done with the lies and games. I'm taking time to decide if there's any way forward for us, but for now, I need you to leave." Her face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks. I felt a pang of sorrow for her, but I reminded myself that I needed to prioritize my own healing. I watched as she turned away, leaving me standing there, alone with a mixture of emotions swirling inside me. I had taken a significant step in reclaiming my life. I was no longer merely a victim in this story. I was the author, ready to write the next chapter. I didn't know what the future held, but I was determined to find out, one step at a time. The days after Jennifer left the house were a whirlwind of emotions. I felt a strange mix of freedom and loneliness. It was as if a heavy weight had been lifted off my shoulders, but in its place was a gaping hole where my marriage used to be. I spent a lot of time reflecting on everything that had just happened, trying to process the whirlwind of emotions and figure out what I wanted moving forward. I filled my days with distractions. I went to the gym, reconnected with friends, and even picked up old hobbies I had long neglected. I found solace in the rhythm of lifting weights, each rep allowing me to release pent-up anger and frustration. I also started to notice the little things in life, the simple joys of being alone, the quiet moments of peace that came with solitude. I hadn't realized how much I'd lost sight of myself while wrapped up in trying to maintain the facade of a perfect marriage. As I began to focus on my own well-being, I also sought counsel from a therapist. It was a daunting decision to make, but I knew I needed a safe space to unravel my feelings. The sessions allowed me to voice the pain I felt, the anger, the betrayal, and even the lingering love I had for Jennifer. My therapist encouraged me to explore what I truly wanted, to think about my own happiness instead of merely reacting to her actions. One evening, while I was sitting in my living room, a thought struck me. I needed to reclaim my power. Jennifer had tried to control the narrative, to keep me in the dark while she lived a double life. I decided I wouldn't allow her to dictate my story any longer. I began drafting a letter to her, detailing my feelings and the lessons I had learned through this ordeal. I wanted her to understand the impact of her choices, but more importantly, I wanted to make it clear that I was taking control of my own life. After several drafts and revisions, I finally had the letter. I felt a sense of catharsis wash over me as I poured my heart onto the page, confronting the reality of our relationship and how it had morphed into something unrecognizable. It was a powerful act of closure, even if I wasn't entirely sure how she would react to it. When I finished the letter, I knew I had to deliver it in person. I wanted to look her in the eyes when she read it, though I wasn't entirely sure why I felt the need for that connection. Maybe it was to see if she truly understood the pain she had caused, or perhaps it was to give myself one final moment of clarity before closing the chapter on our relationship entirely. I decided to meet her at a local park. It was a neutral ground, somewhere we had shared good memories, and I hoped it would provide the right atmosphere for this pivotal moment. As I approached the park, my heart raced. I spotted her sitting on a bench, her posture tense. She looked up as I approached, and I could see the mixture of apprehension and hope in her eyes. "Mark," she said softly, standing to greet me. I could tell she had been crying. "I didn't think you wanted to see me again." "I didn't," I replied, my voice steady but devoid of anger. "But I think it's important that we talk." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. I handed her the letter and she accepted it with trembling hands. "What's this?" she asked, but I urged her to read it. I watched as she unfolded the paper, her eyes scanning the words I had carefully crafted. I held my breath, waiting for her reaction. Her expression shifted as she read through the letter. Confusion gave way to sadness, and I could see the tears welling in her eyes. The words I had written cut deep, and I could sense the realization hitting her hard. After a few moments of silence, she looked up at me, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm so sorry, Mark. I never meant to hurt you like this." "I know you didn't think about it at the time," I replied, keeping my tone calm. "But you shattered my trust. You need to understand the consequences of your actions. I'm sorry for my part in how we got here as well, but I can't live in the shadows of your choices anymore." She opened her mouth to speak, but I raised my hand, signaling her to pause. "This isn't about blaming each other anymore. I've had time to reflect, and I've realized that I'm ready to move on. I can't build a future on the ashes of our past." Jennifer nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I understand. I just wish things could be different." "I do too," I admitted, feeling a pang of sympathy for her. "But wishing doesn't change what's happened. I want to focus on my own healing now. I need to take this time for myself." We shared a moment of silence, the weight of our past hanging in the air between us. It was both liberating and painful to confront the reality of our situation. I could see that she was beginning to accept the finality of it all, and I hoped this would be a turning point for both of us. As we stood up to leave, she reached out and touched my arm gently, a gesture that felt heavy with unspoken words. "I wish you the best, Mark. You deserve happiness." "Thank you," I replied, trying to muster a smile. "I hope you find it too." With that, I turned and walked away, feeling a sense of closure wash over me. I was ready to step into the next chapter of my life, free from the shadows of betrayal. I felt lighter, empowered to embrace the unknown. The road ahead was uncertain, but I was determined to navigate it on my own terms. I had reclaimed my power, and with it, I would forge a new path, one where I was in control of my own happiness. In the weeks that followed, I focused on rebuilding my life. The initial shock of everything had faded, replaced by a sense of renewal and determination. I embraced my freedom and started exploring the things I had put on hold during my marriage, the hobbies, friendships, and even career goals that had taken a backseat. I signed up for a cooking class, something I had always wanted to do, and found joy in creating new dishes. Cooking became a therapeutic outlet, a way to express myself and take control of my own narrative. With the help of my therapist, I learned to disentangle my self-worth from the relationship I had with Jennifer. I realized that her infidelity did not define me. I was more than a broken marriage or a victim of betrayal. I worked on setting healthy boundaries and understanding what I truly wanted in life and in a partner. I learned to value myself and my needs, something I had neglected for far too long. Through this process, I also reconnected with my friends. Mark, in particular, became a steady support system. We spent countless nights talking over beers, laughing, and commiserating about life. He reminded me of the importance of camaraderie and the strength that comes from surrounding myself with people who genuinely cared. As time passed, I began to feel lighter. The anger and resentment I had held onto slowly dissipated like fog in the morning sun. I would often reflect on my relationship with Jennifer, understanding that while it was painful, it was also a valuable lesson in self-discovery. It made me realize the importance of honesty in relationships and the necessity for open communication. One sunny Saturday afternoon, I was out running errands when I unexpectedly crossed paths with Jennifer at a local grocery store. My heart raced, but I reminded myself of how far I had come. I stood there for a moment trying to gauge her reaction. She looked different, more put together, a hint of confidence in her demeanor. Our eyes met, and I could see the acknowledgement of our shared history in her gaze. "Mark," she said softly, a tentative smile forming on her lips. "Jennifer," I replied, my tone neutral. There was an awkward silence as we stood there, surrounded by the mundane bustle of the grocery store. I could see she wanted to say something, but the words hung in the air like unspoken questions. After a moment, she spoke again. "How are you?" "I'm good, actually," I said, surprising myself with the sincerity of my response. "I've been focusing on myself and taking things one day at a time." "Good to hear," she replied, her voice tinged with something, regret perhaps. "I've been doing a lot of thinking too, about everything." I nodded, unsure of how to respond. "Yeah, it's been a journey." "I'm really sorry for everything that happened, Mark," she said, her eyes earnest. "I wish I could take it back, but I know I can't. You deserved better." Her words felt like a weight lifted off my shoulders. I had spent so long grappling with the betrayal that hearing her acknowledge it felt oddly validating. "Thank you for saying that," I replied, feeling a mix of relief and closure. "I appreciate it." We exchanged a few more pleasantries, and as we parted ways, I felt a sense of finality settle in. I realized that while our relationship had ended in pain, it had also paved the way for personal growth. I walked out of the store, feeling lighter than I had in months, knowing I had closed that chapter for good. As the sun set that evening, casting a warm glow over everything, I reflected on my journey. I had faced betrayal, confronted my demons, and emerged stronger and more self-aware. It wasn't about revenge or anger anymore. It was about healing and growth. I had taken control of my life, and I was ready to embrace whatever came next. Looking ahead, I felt a sense of optimism. I knew I was capable of finding love again, but this time it would be built on a foundation of trust and respect. I was determined to ensure that my next relationship would be a partnership where both of us could thrive, free from the mistakes of the past. In the end, the experience had taught me that moving on doesn't mean forgetting. It means learning from the past and using it to build a brighter future. I had shattered the illusion of control that Jennifer once held, but in doing so, I had also found my own strength. I was ready to write the next chapter of my life, one filled with promise, self-discovery, and the confidence to seek my own happiness.